I never thought I would end up in court over a pair of snow pants. But here I am, sitting in a cramped courtroom in Boulder, Colorado, watching a middle-aged woman named Patricia Henderson squirm in her seat as the judge reviews the evidence against her. My name is Xander, and I am a 32-year-old software engineer who moved into the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision about 18 months ago. The neighborhood seemed perfect at first. Neat rows of identical two-story houses, manicured lawns, and friendly neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs. What I did not know was that the homeowner association was run by Patricia Henderson, a woman who took her position as HOA president more seriously than most people take actual jobs. Patricia was exactly what you would picture when someone says the word Karen. She was in her late 40s with a blonde bob that looked like it required daily maintenance, always wore expensive athleisure clothing despite never actually exercising, and drove a white Lexus SUV with custom license plates that read, "Hoa Boss." From the moment I moved in, she made it clear that she was watching everyone in the neighborhood like a hawk. The first few months were relatively peaceful. I followed all the HOA rules, kept my grass trimmed to the required 2.5 inches, painted my mailbox the approved shade of forest green, and made sure my trash cans were never visible from the street except on collection days. I thought I was doing everything right, but Patricia always found something to complain about. My Christmas lights were too bright. My car was parked 3 inches over the edge of my driveway. My front door wreath was not centered properly. Every week, I received a new violation notice in my mailbox, each one more ridiculous than the last. I tried to be patient. I understood that some people just needed to feel important, and if that meant Patricia could power trip over mailbox placement, then so be it. But things escalated in ways I never could have predicted. It started in early January when I decided to finally organize my garage. I had been putting it off since I moved in, and the space had become a cluttered mess of moving boxes, tools, and sporting equipment. I spent an entire weekend sorting through everything, installing shelves, and creating a proper storage system. Among the items I organized were my winter clothes, including an expensive pair of insulated snow pants I had bought the previous year for a ski trip to Vail. These were not cheap pants. I had spent nearly $300 on them because I planned to go skiing regularly, and I wanted gear that would last. They were black with orange accents, made by a high-end outdoor company, and they fit perfectly. I hung them on a hook near the front of my garage, along with my ski jacket and other winter gear, so they would be easy to grab whenever I needed them. The trouble began on a Tuesday morning in mid-January. I had taken the day off work to handle some errands, and I noticed my garage door was slightly open when I came downstairs. I knew I had closed it the night before, so I walked outside to check what was going on. The door was maybe 6 inches off the ground, just enough for someone to have lifted it and crawled underneath. My first thought was that someone had tried to break in, but when I opened the garage fully and looked around, nothing seemed to be missing. My tools were still there, my bike was in its usual spot, and my car was untouched. I checked everything carefully, but I could not figure out what had happened. Maybe the door had malfunctioned, I thought. Maybe I had not closed it all the way and it had drifted open overnight. I did not think about it again until that weekend when I was planning to go skiing with some friends from work. I went to the garage to grab my snow pants, but they were not on the hook where I had left them. I looked around, thinking maybe they had fallen, but they were nowhere to be found. I searched the entire garage, checked my bedroom closet, looked in my car, but the pants had vanished. That was when I remembered the garage door being open. Someone had stolen my snow pants. I was frustrated but not particularly alarmed. It seemed like a weird thing to steal. Why would someone break into a garage and only take a pair of snow pants? It did not make sense, but I filed a police report anyway, more for insurance purposes than anything else. The officer who came to take my statement seemed equally confused by the theft, but he dutifully wrote everything down and gave me a case number. I bought a new pair of snow pants, though they were not as nice as my original ones, and I installed a security camera in my garage. The camera was small and discreet, positioned to cover the entire space, and it connected to an app on my phone that would send me alerts if it detected any motion. I figured it was a good investment regardless of whether the thief came back. 2 weeks passed without incident. I went skiing, enjoyed my new pants despite them not fitting quite as well as my old ones, and mostly forgot about the whole thing. Then I got a violation notice from the HOA. The notice was sitting in my mailbox when I got home from work on a Thursday evening. I opened it expecting the usual nonsense about my grass being a quarter inch too long or my garbage can being visible from the street for 30 seconds longer than allowed. Instead, I found something that made my blood boil. The notice stated that I was in violation of HOA rules for leaving unauthorized winter sporting equipment visible in my yard. Attached to the notice was a photograph of my front porch, and sitting on one of the porch chairs, clear as day, was a pair of black snow pants with orange accents. My snow pants. I stared at the photo for a long moment, trying to process what I was seeing. Someone had stolen my pants from my garage and then left them on my front porch just so Patricia could write me up for a violation. It was insane. It was petty beyond belief. And I was absolutely certain that Patricia was behind it. I marched over to her house immediately. Patricia lived in the largest house in the subdivision, a corner lot with an immaculate yard and a 3-car garage. I rang her doorbell and waited, trying to keep my anger in check. She opened the door with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Jake, what can I do for you? Did you steal my snow pants?" I asked, holding up the violation notice. Her expression shifted to one of exaggerated confusion. "I have no idea what you are talking about." "These pants," I said, pointing to the photo. "They were stolen from my garage 2 weeks ago. Now they are suddenly on my front porch and I am getting a violation notice. You are the only person who would do something this ridiculous." Patricia crossed her arms. "I think you need to calm down. I was simply doing my job as HOA president. If you left sporting equipment on your front porch, that is a clear violation of our community guidelines." "I did not leave them there," I said through gritted teeth. "Someone put them there. Someone who wanted to write me up for a violation." "Well, that sounds like a personal problem," she said. "Maybe you should be more careful with your belongings. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a meeting to prepare for." She closed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, so angry I could barely think straight. Then I walked back to my house, retrieved my snow pants from the porch, and went straight to my garage. I had a security camera now, and I was going to catch Patricia in the act if she tried anything else. The pants I found on my porch were indeed my original pair. I could tell by a small repair I had made to one of the pockets where the zipper had started to come loose. This confirmed that Patricia had not only stolen them, but had kept them for 2 weeks before returning them in a way that would get me in trouble. I spent the next few days reviewing the footage from my security camera, looking for any evidence of Patricia entering my garage. The camera had only been installed after the theft, so I did not have footage of her taking the pants, but I was hoping she would try something else. I also started keeping detailed records of every interaction I had with her, every violation notice she sent, and every piece of evidence I could gather about her harassment. Patricia did not disappoint. 3 days after our confrontation, my security camera caught her red-handed. It was around 2 in the morning when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the garage camera. I grabbed my phone and opened the app, expecting to see a raccoon or maybe a stray cat. Instead, I saw Patricia Henderson, dressed in dark clothing, lifting my garage door and crawling inside. I could not believe what I was watching. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and watched as she moved around my garage with a small flashlight. She was looking for something, opening storage bins and moving things around. Then she grabbed a bag of fertilizer I had bought for my lawn and dragged it toward the door. I was already out of bed and heading downstairs. I turned on every light in my house and opened the door to the garage just as Patricia was trying to crawl back out under the door with my fertilizer. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. Patricia froze, caught in the act. The garage lights illuminated her face and I could see the panic in her eyes. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she dropped the fertilizer and tried to run. I was not about to let her get away. I had video evidence of her breaking into my garage, but I wanted her to face immediate consequences. I ran after her, my phone already dialing 911. "I need to report a burglary in progress," I said to the dispatcher. "Someone broke into my garage and I have them on camera." Patricia made it about halfway across my front yard before she gave up running. She stopped, turned around, and glared at me with an expression of pure hatred. "You are making a huge mistake," she said. "I am the HOA president. I have every right to inspect properties in this neighborhood." "At 2 in the morning, by breaking into my garage," I said. "That is called burglary, Patricia." The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers pulled up in their patrol car and I explained the situation while showing them the footage on my phone. Patricia tried to argue that she was performing her duties as HOA president, that she had the authority to enter any property in the subdivision to check for violations, but the officers were not buying it. "Madam, that is not how it works," one of the officers said. "You cannot enter someone's property without permission, regardless of your position in the HOA. But the CC and Articus clearly state that I have the right to inspect," Patricia insisted. The officer looked at me. "Do you want to press charges?" I did not hesitate. "Yes." They arrested Patricia right there in my front yard. She protested the entire time, shouting about how I was going to regret this, how she would make my life miserable, how the HOA would fine me into oblivion. The officers put her in the back of the patrol car, and I watched as they drove away, feeling a sense of satisfaction I had not experienced in months. But the story did not end there. In fact, it was only beginning. The next morning, I received a call from a detective named Sarah Morrison. She wanted to meet with me to discuss the case against Patricia. I agreed to come to the police station that afternoon, and when I arrived, Detective Morrison led me to a small interview room and pulled out a thick folder. "Mr. Xander, I want to thank you for reporting this incident," she said. "We have been receiving complaints about Patricia Henderson for several months now, but no one has been willing to press charges until now." "Other people have had problems with her?" I asked. "Multiple complaints," Detective Morrison confirmed. "Breaking and entering, harassment, theft of property. But everyone was too afraid of HOA retaliation to follow through with charges. Your case gives us the leverage we need to investigate her properly." She opened the folder and showed me reports from other residents in the neighborhood. I recognized several names. There was Daniel Martinez, who lived 3 houses down from me. Patricia had allegedly entered his backyard without permission and removed a garden gnome she deemed not in keeping with neighborhood aesthetics. There was Linda Chen, who reported that Patricia had stolen packages from her front porch and then written her up for leaving them there too long. There was Michael Roberts, who claimed Patricia had let herself into his house while he was at work and rearranged his living room furniture because she could see it through his front window and thought it looked cluttered. The pattern was clear. Patricia had been abusing her position as HOA president for years, using it as an excuse to invade people's privacy, steal their belongings, and harass them into submission. And everyone had been too scared to stop her. Why did not anyone report this before? I asked. Fear, mostly, Detective Morrison said. Patricia has connections on the HOA board, and she has made it clear that anyone who opposes her will face constant violations, fines, and legal action from the HOA. A lot of people felt trapped. But now that we have concrete evidence of criminal activity, we can build a case. Over the next few weeks, the investigation expanded. More neighbors came forward with stories of Patricia's abuse. The police obtained warrants to search her house, and they found a storage room filled with items she had stolen from various properties in the neighborhood. My original snow pants were there, along with garden decorations, tools, mail, and even someone's wedding album. It was like a bizarre trophy room of her conquests. The district attorney decided to charge Patricia with multiple counts of burglary, theft, and harassment. The charges were serious enough that she could face significant jail time if convicted. But Patricia had hired an expensive lawyer, and she was fighting the charges aggressively. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for late March. I had to take time off work to attend, and I was nervous about testifying. I had never been involved in a criminal case before, and the idea of sitting in a courtroom and describing what happened made me anxious. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and an American flag in the corner. Patricia sat at the defense table with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s who looked like he charged $500 an hour. She was wearing a conservative blue dress and had her hair pulled back in a neat bun, clearly trying to present herself as a respectable community leader rather than a petty criminal. The prosecutor, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, called me to the stand first. I was sworn in and took my seat, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Mr. Xander, can you describe the events of January 15th? Jennifer asked. I told the story as clearly as I could. I described finding my garage door open, discovering my snow pants were missing, filing the police report, and then finding the pants on my porch with the HOA violation notice. I explained how I had installed the security camera and caught Patricia breaking into my garage in the middle of the night. And did you give Miss Henderson permission to enter your garage? Jennifer asked. Absolutely not, I said. Patricia's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to suggest that I might have left the garage door open or that Patricia had a legitimate reason to be there, but I held firm. The video evidence was clear, and there was no way to explain it away. The judge, an older man named Thomas Brennan, reviewed the evidence carefully. He watched the security footage, examined the violation notice, and listened to testimony from Detective Morrison about the other stolen items found in Patricia's house. When it was Patricia's turn to testify, she stuck to her story that she was simply performing her duties as HOA president. She claimed that the CC and Articus gave her the authority to inspect properties at any time, and that she had been acting in the best interests of the community. Miss Henderson, you understand that entering someone's property without permission is illegal? Judge Brennan asked. Your Honor, the homeowners in this subdivision signed agreements giving the HOA certain rights, Patricia said. I was simply exercising those rights. That is not how property law works, the judge said, his tone stern. The HOA does not have the authority to break into people's garages in the middle of the night. That is burglary. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that his client had made an error in judgment, but had no criminal intent. He suggested that she had been overzealous in her role as HOA president, but had not meant to break the law. The judge was not impressed. He ruled that there was sufficient evidence to move forward with a trial, and he set a court date for May. In the meantime, Patricia was suspended from her position as HOA president. The board held an emergency meeting and voted to remove her temporarily while the criminal case was pending. Several board members resigned in protest, claiming they had been unaware of Patricia's activities, though many neighbors suspected they had known exactly what was going on and had simply chosen to look the other way. A new interim president was appointed, a reasonable man named Greg Foster, who immediately began reviewing the HOA's policies and practices. He sent out a letter to all residents apologizing for Patricia's behavior and promising that the HOA would no longer engage in harassment or overreach. The trial began in early May, and it lasted for 3 days. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence: security footage, witness testimony from multiple neighbors, photographs of the stolen items found in Patricia's house, and records of the harassment she had inflicted on residents over the years. Patricia's defense was weak. Her lawyer argued that she had been trying to maintain neighborhood standards and that her actions, while perhaps overzealous, were not criminal. But the jury did not buy it. They deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on multiple counts of burglary and theft. Judge Brennan scheduled a sentencing hearing for 2 weeks later. I attended, along with several other neighbors who had been victims of Patricia's crimes. We all wanted to see justice served. Patricia stood before the judge looking defeated. Her expensive clothes and perfect hair could not hide the fact that she had been caught, tried, and convicted. Her lawyer made a plea for leniency, arguing that his client had no prior criminal record and had been a productive member of the community. "Your Honor, Miss Henderson made mistakes, but she does not deserve to go to prison," the lawyer said. "She would benefit more from counseling and community service." Judge Brennan listened carefully, then turned his attention to Patricia. "Miss Henderson, what you did was not a simple mistake," he said. "You systematically violated the privacy and property rights of your neighbors for years. You used your position of authority to bully, harass, and steal from people who trusted you to represent their interests. That is not overzealousness. That is abuse of power." Patricia started to cry, but the judge continued. "However, I do agree that prison time may not be the most appropriate punishment in this case. Instead, I am sentencing you to 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory anger management classes. You will also pay restitution to all the victims, including Mr. Xander for his stolen snow pants and the emotional distress you caused him." The courtroom was silent as the judge outlined the terms of Patricia's sentence. "She was ordered to pay me $800, $300 for the original snow pants, $200 for the replacement pair, and $300 for the cost of the security camera I had to install. She was also required to write formal apologies to every neighbor she had harassed and to resign permanently from any position of authority in the HOA. Additionally," Judge Brennan said, "you are prohibited from serving on any homeowner association board for a period of 5 years. If you violate any terms of your probation, you will serve 18 months in county jail. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said quietly. The anger management classes were scheduled to begin the following month. They were held twice a week for 12 weeks, and Patricia was required to complete all sessions and receive a certificate of completion from a licensed therapist. The judge made it clear that if she missed even one session without a valid excuse, she would face immediate jail time. I left the courtroom feeling vindicated. It had been a long and exhausting process, but justice had been served. Patricia would face consequences for her actions, and the neighborhood would be free from her tyranny. In the weeks that followed, life in Meadowbrook Hills slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board, led by Greg Foster, implemented significant reforms. They revised the CC and Articus to include clear limits on the board's authority, established a formal complaint process for residents who felt they were being harassed, and created an oversight committee to ensure that no one person could wield as much unchecked power as Patricia had. I received my restitution check from Patricia in June. It arrived in the mail with a handwritten apology note that was clearly written under duress. The note was brief and impersonal, saying only that she regretted any inconvenience she had caused and hoped we could move forward. It was not a sincere apology, but I had not expected one. Patricia was not capable of genuine remorse. I used the money to buy a new pair of snow pants, even better than my original ones, and I donated the rest to a local charity. I also kept the security camera in my garage just in case. Once bitten, twice shy, as they say. The community service Patricia was required to perform included cleaning up local parks, volunteering at a food bank, and helping to organize neighborhood events. I saw her occasionally during these activities, always looking miserable and resentful. She never made eye contact with me, and I was fine with that. I had no desire to interact with her any more than necessary. The anger management classes seemed to be having some effect, though it was hard to tell. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia had been resistant at first, arguing with the therapist and insisting that she did not have an anger problem. But as the weeks went on, she seemed to soften slightly. Whether that was genuine growth or simply a performance to satisfy the court's requirements, I could not say. One afternoon in late July, I was working in my front yard when Patricia walked past on her way to another community service assignment. She stopped at the edge of my property and hesitated, as if she wanted to say something. I looked up from the flower bed I was weeding and waited. "I am sorry," she said finally, "for everything." It was the first time she had spoken directly to me since the trial. Her voice was quiet, and she looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Thank you," I said, not sure what else to say. She nodded and walked away. It was not much, but it was something. Maybe the anger management classes were actually working. The HOA continued to improve under Greg's leadership. The constant violation notices stopped, and people began to feel comfortable actually living in their homes without fear of being written up for minor infractions. The neighborhood became a more pleasant place to live, and property values actually increased as word spread that the tyrannical HOA president was gone. I became more involved in the community after the trial. I joined the HOA board as a regular member, wanting to help ensure that nothing like Patricia's reign of terror could happen again. It was time-consuming work, but it felt important. We implemented new policies, improved communication with residents, and focused on building a genuine sense of community rather than simply enforcing arbitrary rules. One of the first things we did was review all the existing HOA rules and eliminate the ones that were unnecessarily restrictive or invasive. The requirement that grass be exactly 2.5 inches was changed to a more reasonable range of 2 to 4 inches. The rules about holiday decorations were loosened to allow for more personal expression. The prohibition on certain types of mailboxes was eliminated entirely. We even allowed garden gnomes, much to the delight of Daniel Martinez, who immediately put out a collection of them in his front yard. By September, Patricia had completed her anger management classes and received her certificate from the therapist. I heard that she was planning to move out of the neighborhood once her probation was over. She had become a pariah in Meadowbrook Hills, and even people who had not been directly affected by her actions treated her with suspicion and distrust. It was a lonely existence, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The story of Patricia's downfall spread beyond our neighborhood. Local news outlets picked up the story, and it became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked HOA power. I was interviewed by a reporter from the Denver Post, and my story was published in an article about HOA abuse across Colorado. The article prompted several state legislators to propose new laws that would provide better oversight of homeowner associations and stronger protections for residents. I never expected my missing snow pants to spark a movement for HOA reform, but that is exactly what happened. The story resonated with people because so many had experienced similar situations. Petty HOA boards wielding disproportionate power, enforcing ridiculous rules, and making life miserable for residents who just wanted to live in peace. By the time fall arrived, my life had returned to a comfortable routine. I went to work, came home, enjoyed my garage without fear of break-ins, and participated in neighborhood activities without worrying about violation notices. The snow pants incident had been stressful and frustrating, but it had ultimately led to positive change for everyone in Meadowbrook Hills. I even went skiing again that winter, using my new and improved snow pants. As I rode the chairlift up the mountain at Breckenridge, looking out over the snow-covered peaks, I thought about how much had changed in the past year. I had moved to Colorado for a fresh start, for the outdoor lifestyle and the beautiful scenery, and I had nearly let one petty, vindictive woman ruin that for me. But I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be bullied or intimidated. And in doing so, I had helped an entire neighborhood break free from years of harassment and abuse. Patricia completed her probation without incident and moved to Arizona in the spring of the following year. I heard she bought a condo in a community without an HOA. Maybe she learned her lesson, or maybe she just wanted to avoid any situation where she might be tempted to abuse power again. Either way, I was glad she was gone. The final chapter of the story came almost 2 years after the initial theft. I received a letter in the mail from the State Bar Association informing me that Patricia's lawyer had been disciplined for attempting to suborn perjury during her trial. Apparently, he had tried to coach several witnesses to provide false testimony on Patricia's behalf, and one of them had reported him to the authorities. He was suspended from practicing law for 6 months and required to complete ethics training. It was a fitting end to the whole saga. Patricia had surrounded herself with people who were willing to bend the rules, and they had all eventually faced consequences for it. As for me, I continued to live in Meadowbrook Hills, and I remained active on the HOA board. We had created something good out of a bad situation, and I was proud of the work we had done. The neighborhood was thriving, and people actually enjoyed living there now. I kept my security camera in the garage, though. Some habits are hard to break, and I figured it never hurt to be cautious. But I never had another break-in, and my belongings stayed exactly where I left them. The snow pants that had started this whole mess eventually wore out after several seasons of heavy use. When I finally threw them away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Those pants had been at the center of a bizarre and frustrating ordeal, but they had also been the catalyst for positive change. In a weird way, I was grateful for everything that had happened. I learned a lot from the experience. I learned that standing up to bullies is worth it, even when it is difficult and time-consuming. I learned that most people are reasonable and decent when given the chance, and that communities can heal and grow stronger after conflict. And I learned that sometimes the most absurd situations can lead to the most meaningful outcomes. Life in a homeowner association is never simple. There are always going to be rules to follow, disagreements to navigate, and personalities to manage. But it does not have to be a nightmare of petty tyranny and constant surveillance. With the right leadership and a commitment to treating people with respect, an HOA can actually enhance a community rather than detract from it. That is what we built in Meadowbrook Hills, and I am proud to be part of it. The months after Patricia's departure brought a renewed sense of freedom to the neighborhood. People started hosting block parties again, something that had been rare during Patricia's tenure, because she always found reasons to shut them down or create restrictions that made them not worth the hassle. Greg Foster and the new board encouraged community gatherings, and the subdivision came alive, with the sound of neighbors actually enjoying each other's company. I made friends with people I had barely spoken to during the Patricia era. Daniel Martinez, the guy with the garden gnomes, turned out to be a chef at a local restaurant, and he started hosting monthly potlucks in his backyard. Linda Chen was a graphic designer who helped create a new neighborhood newsletter that actually featured positive stories and community updates, instead of just violation notices and threats. Michael Roberts was a retired teacher who organized a book club that met every other week at different houses. The transformation was remarkable. Within 6 months of Patricia's sentencing, Meadowbrook Hills had evolved from a tense, rule-obsessed subdivision into an actual community where people knew their neighbors and looked out for each other. I also learned more about Patricia's background during this time. One of the long-time residents, an elderly woman named Ruth, who had lived in the neighborhood since it was first built 20 years ago, told me that Patricia had not always been so controlling and vindictive. When she first moved in about 8 years ago, she had been friendly and enthusiastic about getting involved in the community. She volunteered for everything, Ruth said. She organized fundraisers, helped with landscaping projects, baked cookies for new residents. Everyone liked her. "What changed?" I asked. Ruth sighed. Her husband left her about 5 years ago, just packed up and moved out one day. Patricia threw herself into the HOA after that, and she became obsessed with control. I think she felt like if she could not control her personal life, she would control everything else around her. It was a sad story, and it helped me understand Patricia a bit better. Not that it excused her behavior, but it at least provided context. She had been dealing with pain and loss in the worst possible way, lashing out at innocent people instead of getting the help she needed. The anger management classes the judge ordered had probably come years too late. If Patricia had sought help after her divorce, maybe none of this would have happened. But instead, she had let her pain turn into anger, and her anger had turned into a need to dominate and control everyone around her. I hoped the therapy would help her, though I doubted I would ever know. Once she moved to Arizona, she disappeared from our lives completely. No one in the neighborhood kept in touch with her, and as far as I knew, she never tried to reach out to anyone. The restitution payments continued to arrive on schedule. Besides the initial payment to me, Patricia had to pay thousands of dollars to other residents whose property she had stolen or damaged. The payments were spread out over her 2-year probation period, and every month someone in the neighborhood received a check. It was a constant reminder of what she had done, and the price she was paying for it. The legal reforms that came out of our case were probably the most significant long-term impact. The Colorado State Legislature passed a bill that created new oversight mechanisms for homeowner associations. The law required HOAs to register with the state, submit annual reports, and follow specific procedures for enforcing rules and collecting fines. It also established a complaint process for residents who felt they were being harassed or unfairly targeted by their HOA boards. The bill was nicknamed Patricia's Law in the media, though the official title was much more boring. Several legislators credited my case with bringing attention to the issue and providing the momentum needed to pass the reforms. I was invited to attend the signing ceremony at the state capitol in Denver, where I shook hands with the governor and posed for photos with the bill's sponsors. It was surreal. A year earlier, I had just been a guy who wanted to go skiing and could not find his snow pants. Now I was standing in the state capitol as legislators praised me for my courage in standing up to HOA abuse. Life is strange sometimes. The skiing trip I took that second winter was even better than the first. I had invited several of my new friends from the neighborhood, and we rented a big cabin in Summit County for a long weekend. We spent our days on the slopes at Keystone and our evenings around the fireplace, telling stories and laughing about how much better life was without Patricia's constant interference. On the last night of the trip, Daniel raised his glass in a toast. "To Jake," he said, "for having the guts to stand up to Patricia and free us all from HOA hell." Everyone cheered and clinked glasses. I felt embarrassed by the attention but also grateful. These were good people, and I was lucky to have them as neighbors and friends. "I just wanted my snow pants back," I said with a laugh. "And you got them back along with justice, legal reforms, and a better neighborhood," Linda said. "Not a bad outcome for a pair of snow pants." She was right. What had started as a petty theft had snowballed into something much larger and more meaningful. I had not set out to be an activist or a reformer. I had just wanted to live my life in peace and occasionally go skiing. But sometimes circumstances force you into action, and you have to decide whether to fight or give in. I was glad I had chosen to fight. When we returned from the ski trip, I found a letter waiting for me in my mailbox. It was from Patricia, postmarked from Scottsdale, Arizona. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was several pages long, handwritten on plain white paper. Patricia's handwriting was neat and precise, just like everything else about her. The tone of the letter was very different from the brief, impersonal apology note she had been forced to write as part of her restitution. "Dear Jake," it began, "I have been in therapy for almost a year now, and my therapist encouraged me to write this letter. Not because the court requires it, but because I genuinely want you to know how sorry I am for what I did to you and to the other residents of Meadowbrook Hills." The letter went on for several pages. Patricia described the anger management classes, which had evolved into more comprehensive therapy dealing with her divorce, her need for control, and her inability to process emotions in healthy ways. She admitted that she had been wrong, that she had abused her power as HOA president, and that she had hurt a lot of people. "I know this does not fix anything," she wrote. "I know I cannot undo the damage I caused or the stress I put you through. But I want you to know that I am working on becoming a better person. I am learning to recognize my triggers, to step back when I feel the need to control situations, and to treat people with the respect they deserve." She ended the letter by thanking me for pressing charges. "I know that sounds strange," she wrote, "but if you had not stood up to me, I would have continued down that path. I would have kept hurting people and destroying relationships. You forced me to face consequences, and those consequences led me to get the help I desperately needed. So thank you, even though I am sure that was not your intention. I read the letter 3 times, trying to decide how I felt about it. Part of me was skeptical. Patricia had proven herself to be manipulative and dishonest, and this could just be another performance, another attempt to present herself as a victim or to avoid further consequences. But another part of me wanted to believe that people could change, that therapy and consequences could actually help someone become better. In the end, I decided it did not really matter whether Patricia's transformation was genuine or not. She was gone from my life and from the neighborhood. She had faced legal consequences for her actions, and whether or not she truly changed was between her and her therapist. I had done what I needed to do. I had stood up for myself, protected my property, and helped create positive change in my community. I filed the letter away in a drawer and went back to my life. The second anniversary of the snow pants theft came and went without much fanfare. The neighborhood had moved on completely. Patricia was a distant memory, occasionally brought up in conversation as a cautionary tale, but no longer a presence in anyone's daily life. The HOA continued to function smoothly under the new board. We had established clear rules and procedures, maintained open communication with residents, and focused on enhancing the community rather than punishing people for minor violations. It was not perfect. There were still occasional disagreements and challenges, but it was a functional, healthy organization that served its intended purpose. I kept my position on the board for another year before deciding to step down. The work had been rewarding, but it was also time-consuming, and I wanted to focus more on my career and personal life. I had met a woman named Emma Webster at one of Daniel's potlucks, and we had started dating seriously. She was a physical therapist who worked at a rehabilitation center in Denver, and she shared my love of skiing and outdoor activities. Emma had moved to the neighborhood just a few months after Patricia's trial ended, so she had missed all the drama. When I told her the story of the stolen snow pants and everything that followed, she could barely believe it. "That actually happened?" she asked. "Like, a real person broke into your garage to steal snow pants just to write you up for an HOA violation?" "Every word of it is true," I said. "I could not make that up if I tried." "That is the most absurd thing I have ever heard," she said, "and also kind of amazing that it led to actual legal reform." "Life is weird," I agreed. Emma and I got engaged the following spring. We planned a small wedding for the fall, and we decided to stay in Meadowbrook Hills after we got married. Despite everything that had happened, I had grown to love the neighborhood and the community we had built there. On our wedding day, the entire neighborhood showed up to celebrate with us. Greg Foster officiated the ceremony in his capacity as a registered officiant, and Daniel catered the reception with an incredible spread of food from his restaurant. Linda designed our invitations and programs, and Michael gave a touching toast about the importance of community and standing up for what is right. It was perfect. As I stood there with Emma, surrounded by friends and neighbors in the subdivision where I had once been harassed by a petty tyrant over winter clothing, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. I had moved to Colorado looking for a fresh start, for adventure and natural beauty and a place to call home. I had found all of that, but I had also found something I had not expected, a sense of purpose and the satisfaction of knowing I had made a real difference. The stolen snow pants had been frustrating and absurd, but they had also been the catalyst for profound change. An entire community had been freed from years of abuse. State laws had been reformed to protect homeowners across Colorado. And I had learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply stand up and say no when someone tries to push you around. Years later, I still live in Meadowbrook Hills. Emma and I have 2 kids now, and we are raising them in the house where all of this started. The garage still has the security camera, though it mostly just records footage of me taking out the trash or loading ski equipment for family trips to the mountains. Patricia never returned to Colorado as far as I know. Her name occasionally comes up when people discuss HOA reform or when new residents ask about the history of the neighborhood. The story has taken on a slightly legendary quality, with some details getting exaggerated in the retelling. But the core truth remains. A woman abused her power, faced consequences, and an entire community became better as a result. I replaced my snow pants 2 more times over the years, and each time I did, I thought about that original pair and the journey they took me on. They are just clothing, just equipment for staying warm on the slopes, but they represented something larger. The importance of standing up for yourself, the power of community, and the possibility of real change even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The HOA meetings these days are boring in the best possible way. We discuss budgets, maintenance schedules, and community events. There are no violation notices for grass being a 1/4 inch too long. No one breaks into garages to steal property and then uses it to harass residents. No one abuses their position to terrorize the neighborhood. It is exactly how an HOA should function, as a tool to maintain and enhance a community, not as a weapon to control and intimidate. And every winter, when I grab my snow pants from the garage and head up to the mountains, I am grateful for the absurd series of events that started with a simple theft. Because sometimes the universe works in strange ways, and sometimes a missing pair of snow pants can change everything.